Welcome to week 15, officially underway. Fantasy fortunes will be made and lost. We got the first game of the week. All 32 teams back in action. Joined with Jeff Bell, Matt Waldman on assignment. Jeff, what have we seen so far tonight up in Seattle?
Well, if you've been paying attention to these teams over the past month, I think you're kind of getting what you would have expected to see here. I think that Seattle, they're starting to, you tell a story about your van breaking down after you finish the tour. I think Seattle's kind of reached that point in the season. They're starting to crack and break down a little bit. San Francisco's up 14-3. We've gotten touchdowns from Christian McCaffrey and from George Kittle, what you'd come to expect. Seattle is learning now they're going to have to lean a little bit more on that passing game and expect to see that in the second half. You might get some of that fantasy goodness out of Geno Smith and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett that you come to expect. The talk of the week coming in was Ken Walker, and he's been very, very quiet tonight. And I think that's probably up to expectations given what San Francisco has done against running backs here this season.
Yeah, I think that how this could skew or change things, Jeff, is folks that are looking at matchups or otherwise not feeling it for a player that they think they should be feeling it for based on what they've done to contribute to their fantasy team, based on maybe on what they paid to draft them or the name brand value. You're wondering, am I really going to bench this player this week? And at least early on, if you weren't feeling it, and it's early, there's still a second half, but if you were thinking San Francisco's defense is so fantasy point averse right now that I'm not going to play Geno Smith, I'm going to play someone like Taylor Heineke or Trevor Lawrence or whoever, Matt Ryan, some of those are looking pretty good right now. Likewise with Kenneth Walker, similar to Travis Etienne and Saquon Barkley last week. So now these other matchups that we're feeling a little bit reluctant to take on, well, they're not San Francisco. So maybe it might cause some overreactions. We'll see. But at the very least, you're going to know by the end of tonight how you did compared to expectations. You're going to see your opponent's lineup. Tonight's game is going to help you make decisions. Remember, 3 games on Saturday, everybody. Yes. Before you go out and do whatever you're doing Saturday, your big holiday plans, set your lineups. We're going to have, we're leading off with Indy, Minnesota, Baltimore, Cleveland, Buffalo, Miami. So we're going to have 4 games in the books by the time we set our lineups on Sunday morning. We're going to have a pretty good idea where we stand, whether we have to go for upside or go for those safe plays. And safe might not seem so safe once the games kick off and vice versa. Jeff, let's talk about some of the thornier situations because there's a lot. I mean, this is why they pay us the big bucks, right?
That's right.
At least we can weigh in. And I think, again, I always like to stress this. If you're listening to the show right now, if it's week 15 and you still care about fantasy football, then you should trust yourself first and foremost.
Yeah.
Because we're just here to give you food for thought, someone to blame when it all goes wrong, somebody to make you feel better about your choice. Let's start with the Miami-Buffalo game tomorrow or Saturday. And Buffalo weather, December, lake effect snow, like the in-laws. I really appreciate that you remembered my fish tour story, though. That's
of course, man.
That warms my heart. Buffalo weather. I know I saw fish up there back in the day. Buffalo. I saw them in Niagara Falls. I saw them all over the place up there in the winter, in the bitter cold, in the snow. And that's what we're going to get. Well, maybe not bitter cold, 20s, I think. Wind, typical wind, 12, 15 miles an hour. But there is now that storm that could dump 9 inches, they're saying, which really isn't that much for lake effect snow. But so how much? And again, it's Tua Tagovailoa. Now, if you're saying Tyreek Hill, you're going too far. Jalen Waddle, right? Gabe Davis. These are players that we, at different points in the season, trusted, or at least had moments that we thought we should trust Gabe Davis. Jalen Waddle hasn't done much for us the last 2 weeks. Tua Tagovailoa was a negative, really, last week, a lineup killer last week. If it wasn't for one pass, he would have really been a total disaster. So looking at that, is Tua in the same boat? Again, this is the right thing to look at Geno tonight and say, I don't want that to be Tua, my fantasy quarterback for my fantasy matchup, for my playoffs on Saturday night, or is that overreacting?
That's where I am on Tua. I'm gonna rank him down outside of the top 12 quarterbacks. And if look at the last couple of weeks, he's really struggled. And what we've seen is teams have really taken away those crossers. They've jammed the middle of the field. They've forced him to attack vertically outside, and then coming into a weather game, that's not going to play into that either. And Buffalo's a team that is built to do that with Tremaine Edmonds in the middle of that defense. He can shut that. His size is able to shut down a lot of those interior passing lanes, forcing outside to the numbers. And I think that that's going to be a struggle for Tua. And we haven't seen Miami be able to run the ball like you would come to expect out of that Mike McDaniel scheme. They've really kind of, I don't know, this is one of those that it seems like the 49ers gave a blueprint and then the Chargers followed it, and Buffalo is more than capable of doing the same thing. You add in the weather, and this is one of those that Miami's been hyping themselves up about the weather all week long. You saw the clip yesterday about McDaniel walking around and wish it was colder. I'm of the belief that if you're going to spend an entire week talking about the weather and not talking about the opponent, I'm a Midwestern guy, and I've been in the cold before. And if you're thinking about the cold before you even step into the cold, you're already lost. Forget about it. It's if that is not in your blood and ready to go, that's a concern. And I think that's, and I hear concerns about Buffalo not having like the snowplow running back, but they got the snowplow playing quarterback in Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where some of it's going to come in. But I think that what you are going to see out of this game, what you're seeing out of this game tonight, what you're probably going to see this weekend is kind of one of the storylines through this season has been the defense is playing very well, kind of that cover two, that too high, that there's been some struggles to adjust to that. It's kept scoring down a little bit. And this really feels like with all the matchups that we have, the importance going into the playoffs on those, that you're going to see maybe a lower scoring week this week. It just kind of has that vibe, and it feels like a very wonky week, and just be prepared for that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Points are going to be hard to come by, and points that you bank in these games tonight, Saturday, you might not feel great, but you might see as the games unfold on Sunday, on Monday night, that you did okay. So let's put the rubber to the road here on Tua. I'm just going to toss out names. You tell me Tua or this quarterback, okay? Tua or Daniel Jones against Washington?
I have Daniel Jones ranked above Tua.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Tua or Jared Goff against the Jets?
I have Goff lower. I'm concerned about Goff's road splits in that one, going against that Jets defense. I think that's I'm excited for that game. I think you're going to get a very physical play on that game, but I do have I have Goff lower than Tua there.
Yeah, and I like the way you frame that. Just we're looking at competing things here, right? Goff on the road, not in those ideal Detroit conditions against a tough Jets defense versus a Lions offense that's peaking. So which is going to win out? This is kind of the scales we put out. Tua or Deshaun Watson on Saturday against Baltimore?
I have Watson right above Tua. I've got Tua at 15 and Watson at 14.
Yeah, I got Watson actually at 12 and Tua at 16. Tua or another quarterback playing in the cold, Aaron Rodgers, going to the Rams Monday night.
I have Rodgers at 18, so a couple spots below Tua. I might need to investigate that one. That's kind of right there in that zone. I've got Mike White at 16. I've got all of them right there. And I think that's an area that, especially in your super flex leagues, but if you're struggling, if you're stretching at one quarterback, you just lost Kyler Murray last week.
Right.
These are the types of quarterbacks to make this decision correctly to advance to the next week.
Yeah. I'm starting Aaron Rodgers in the playoff game. Tua I'm refining. I mean, this is what's good about doing start sit questions also, because you can do your rankings in a vacuum, and then someone asks you, and at that point you're invested, right? I mean, this person is coming to you and actually trusting you as a quote unquote expert and saying, what should I do? Now, all of a sudden, maybe it's not truly skin in the game because it's not your team, but you don't want to let this person down. Right. So if they came to you and said Tua or Taylor Heineke, and I have Tua ahead right now, and Jeff, I'm not sure.
I've got Taylor Heineke at 20 right now, and I've got Russell Wilson at 19, and that's one of those that I'm not sure if he's going to play or not, but I love that matchup against Arizona. So there's going to be some shuffling there as we get a little bit more information come in. But you're exactly right on that, like doing those start sits. So I do a start sit for an hour, and I know that you do start sits on Sunday morning, but in the Discord, the Football Guys Discord, I set aside an hour Sunday morning, and that is so good on helping you really put some of these questions into perspective, looking at your ranks and kind of revisiting, like, maybe that's not right where I want to be on that spot.
Yeah, well, you say, am I really going to tell folks to do this? Am I really?
Yeah.
Let's get one more to a data point. Are we really going to tell people start Tyler Huntley? By the way, it looks like Russell Wilson's going to play, on track to play. It's an afternoon game. You're not waiting for Russell Wilson. It might affect whether you play Jerry Jeudy or Greg Dulcich. Tyler Huntley is a Saturday game. It sounds like he's cleared concussion protocol. It looks like he's going to be out there against Cleveland. Is it going to be out there over Tua in your lineup?
No, I'm not going to put Huntley over him. And a lot of that, the concern on, I think we've only really seen one element of this Baltimore offense succeed, and that's the run game. And Huntley might give you some of that, but we've seen Mark Andrews ever since that injury. He's just been quiet, and they don't have the receivers outside that you would love to hope in an offense. And so that's one that I don't know if the passing element's there. And the way to attack Cleveland has been gashed by running backs all season long. And so I expect Baltimore, that's going to be their game plan a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a good point to pivot off of, Jeff. And I think you're right. With Huntley, I mean, I'm not necessarily down on Huntley. I think he's got a higher floor and a lower ceiling because of that running ability. And if he can put up 12 points, if he can get a rushing touchdown and 60 yards rushing, which is very much possible, then he'll end up being, I think, you'll take that. Maybe you get 6, 7, 8 points from him as a passer. They're going to run the ball a lot. With that in mind, Jeff, how aggressive are we with a J.K. Dobbins when we set our lineups?
I am in an aggressive area with Dobbins. I've got him sitting at running back 20 for me. And I think that comes on. He had that open field run, and that kind of looked goofy, but I think the natural instincts are kind of still there with Dobbins. And, obviously a big week last week. This Cleveland defense has been gashed by running backs. I think they're third in fantasy points allowed to running backs. And so that's a matchup that you want to exploit. I think that they really want to go with Dobbins, and maybe kind of my concern would be maybe the vulture aspect of Gus Edwards, but I like Dobbins this week. And I think that when you're looking at some of these matchups and you're concerned about where some of these are going to play out, he's a guy that the matchup's good enough and his talent's good enough, and he's coming off a strong game last week that I'm willing to invest and roll the dice with that one.
Yeah, I've got him in running back 20 also. I mean, I'm looking at my 0.5 PPR rankings.
That's what I'm looking at too.
Yeah. So again, let's talk some specifics, and we can go off on some tangents with the typical running backs. Actually, Iron's Cat, one of our loyal chat room denizen, asks Dobbins or Barkley.
I got Barkley at 19, right above him. And it's
so hard. I mean, there's backs.
Very hard.
So here's some of the backs that I have above J.K. Dobbins that I won't be surprised at all if they're. And I'm not saying to bench them for Dobbins, okay? But these are backs among others that I have ahead of him. And it's tough because when you know a running back is going to be a focal point of a backfield, not splitting, at least getting some work in the passing game, has a somewhat live offense. So Saquon Barkley absolutely qualifies. Nick Chubb qualifies. I won't be surprised, Jeff, if Nick Chubb has 15 carries for 45 yards and 1 catch for 7 yards. I won't be surprised at all. But I'm not going to count on that when I'm telling people what to do with their lineups. Alvin Kamara. I still have Alvin Kamara ahead. Rested off the bye. It's Atlanta week.
Yes.
Saints are going to get up for Atlanta. But I won't be surprised. I mean, what has Kamara done to justify putting him in the lineup? Travis Etienne. It's Dallas. I think Etienne just gives you that fear of that long run, although we haven't really seen that. So those are some running backs. But I actually had Kenneth Walker below J.K. Dobbins. I don't think I got a question of Dobbins.
I did
Walker.
too.
So I had Walker at 21. I have Najee Harris at 22. David Montgomery at 24. Let me now some running backs I didn't mention.
Yeah.
J.K. Dobbins or Isaiah Pacheco.
I'm aggressive on Pacheco. This
week.
I got him at running back 9. I just love it. We saw that finishing run last week, and it just feels like he's really getting it. And Houston, Houston's defense baffles me because they're just been dominant against the pass. And it's like, I don't know if we're looking at a defense that's really good against the pass, or if it's just that there's just no level of competition in these games. And so, you're kind of taking the second half off in there, but you love the running backs in that matchup. And Pacheco is a guy that I'm getting him in every lineup that I can this weekend.
Yeah, I have him at 14, but I think most start sit questions that we get with Pacheco, the answer is going to be Pacheco. And I think you're right that you pencil him in for 22, 25 carries. You saw against the Rams earlier this year, if the Chiefs can just build a lead, they're going to nurse it with Pacheco. It's more of a Pacheco game than a Jerick McKinnon game, I think, this week.
I think so too.
What about, and we can just continue to use J.K. Dobbins as our meridian here.
Yeah.
But as a way to launch into talking about these guys. What about A.J. Dillon? Are we going to say after everything that happened, it's been good lately, so we're welcoming you back into the circle of trust? How high are we on A.J. Dillon?
I've got A.J. Dillon in high RB3 range. So I've got Dobbins at 20, so he's kind of that low-end RB2. Dillon is a little bit lower in that high RB3, and that's, it's what we're going to see out of Aaron Jones is kind of the question. Not really getting that passing element. You're counting on a touchdown there for A.J. Dillon, I think, to really feel good about that play, and he's certainly capable of doing it. But the Rams are going to be interesting to me because it looked like they were ready to play dead up until really last week, and
5 minutes left.
5 minutes left, and Baker Mayfield is the type that he could stir that locker room.
Sure,
if things are going right for Baker Mayfield, and that locker room can turn against him real quick if things are going wrong. But I think the Rams might be a little bit more feisty than what we would have kind of expected out of that.
Right, against the Green Bay defense that hasn't lived up to expectations. I do think I'm high on Dillon. And it's just the way he's been running the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I think it's tired defenses. The fact that he was barely used at times. He's fresh. I think that Green Bay is still content to run the ball. And I'm probably still holding on too much to what I thought we were going to see from Dillon, which is basically what we saw in the first week of the season and the last time we saw him play. And the fact that the Rams are going to let them control that game. How about Brian Robinson? Every time I look at Brian Robinson, I like him a little bit more this week, Jeff.
I've got him at 23, so right in that ballpark, right, just slightly below Dobbins. But yeah, his production over the last couple weeks has been fantastic. We know what Washington wants to do, and this is, we talked a little bit pre-show about sliding door moments, and you're looking at the Giants and the Commanders here as the sliding door moments where the Giants starting out 6-1, and then they like 1-4-1 over the last 6 games, and then the Commanders are the exact opposite of that. We thought that their season was done, and then they were ripping off 6-1-1, and if had they done that the first 8 weeks of the season, that would have been the entire talk of the NFL. Right. But right now, it's just one of those that I think fatigue sets in on the season a little bit, and we're in the hive mind, the bubble that we live in. If your fantasy team's bad, you start to check out a little bit, and you don't really catch those end of the season runs quite the same way that you do the early season runs. But as sliding door moment, they're really relying on the run game, and he's showing great. He looks so much better. He looks fully recovered from that gunshot, and you can see what Washington had in mind when they brought him in.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful meshing of a mentality or a style of play and a point of emphasis on offense. And maybe he wouldn't have been as exciting in different places, but that's the game plan. And I don't think the Giants are going to get him off that game plan. I think you can pencil him in for 20 carries, a good shot at a touchdown. Caught a couple of passes each of the last 2 weeks. Antonio Gibson's going to be mixed in. And the other thing about this game specifically is the schedule makers, are they messing with the Giants a little bit? Because these teams played 2 weeks ago. Yes. Washington gets to go, golf, go to some holiday parties, watch some tape, and the Giants have to go play the Eagles. And then let's play again and see how it goes. I wonder how it's going to go. I don't want to take anything away from the Giants. And if the Giants play Washington straight up in this game, then kudos to them, because it's not really fair. The other thing that strikes me, just as an aside, I mentioned this on the show this morning, Jeff. This game, to me, striking, because 2 years ago in week 18, was it week 18 or week 17? I don't know if it was week 18 by then. We saw Jalen Hurts get benched. Was it for Nate Sudfeld? I don't even remember who they put in.
Yes, it was.
And the division was on the line. The division, it was affecting who won the division. Taylor Heineke actually got to play a playoff game against Tampa Bay. It was the year Tampa Bay won the Super Bowl. And now we've come all the way around to maybe all 4 teams can make the playoffs. And a game between Washington and the Giants gets flexed to the prime time, and how quickly things can turn around, how quickly things can change. All right. Let's move to wide receivers. And let's pick somebody out to start the discussion like we did with J.K. Dobbins. I actually, Jalen Waddle would have been a good one. He's my wide receiver 24, but let's go with my wide receiver 25.
He's my wide receiver 24 too.
There you go. See, the great minds. So my wide receiver right below him, Amari Cooper.
Okay.
What do we do with Amari Cooper? Even if folks are on the fence, because maybe he's going to see Marlon Humphrey. Maybe he's going to. We're seeing. I think Deshaun Watson has better chemistry with Donovan Peoples-Jones and David Njoku at this point. But at the same time, it's Amari Cooper. We know that he can put up week winning totals. So where are we at on the temperature scale for him?
So I've got Cooper at 29, and I actually have Donovan Peoples-Jones at 25.
Yeah,
I've got Donovan
that's
Peoples-Jones
smart.
higher, and it's one of those that we had the story in the preseason that Deshaun Watson and Peoples-Jones were really building a rapport in the preseason, and then we see they're not afraid to use Peoples-Jones as that primary receiver either, and we've seen him get high targets, and he's the healthier one right now, and I think that Deshaun Watson, he's stepping into a brand new situation with both of these guys, so he's not going to have a preconceived relationship with Amari Cooper go that direction. Right. So I've got Peoples-Jones at 25 and Cooper a little bit lower at 29.
See, I've got Peoples-Jones at 28, and now I want to swap them because I think you're right. I mean, I think you're right that I don't imagine a lot of people have both, although it's certainly possible that Peoples-Jones may well be the better play out of this week. What about Mike Evans? A lot of people are off the Mike Evans train. Like, that's enough. They're washing their hands of him. Are they going to regret it going up against Cincinnati, or is it going to be smart? And this is actually finally got it. You realize that Mike Evans isn't going to be a fantasy force this year.
I'm at 21, and it's just one of those that I feel like I can't fully ship him off. But it's one of those that when you watch him play, he's an older receiver now, and he entered the league when he was a little bit younger. And so you see some of that when you see he's not getting that separation, and he was never a huge separator. And so, but you see, it just seems like he's not on the same page as Tom Brady. And I don't know that if that's physical decline on Mike Evans or if that's physical decline on Tom Brady. But we know with Brady, he's going to throw it to the spot where he thinks that you're supposed to be. And it seems like Evans not getting to that spot. And even when he does, he drops the ball. And so how many times have we seen, even last week, I think it was last week, Evans had a walk-in touchdown and a long touchdown and just dropped the ball. Yeah. And so it's just, I don't know if it's the physical decline is really just kind of caught up to Mike Evans, the amount of football that he's played, or if they're just, for whatever reason, they can't get on the same page. But as you start to talk about it and as you start to think about it, you look at this matchup against Cincinnati. The pass defense has been very, very good for Cincinnati. Yeah. But at the same time, like, we're at that place where, like, would you be shocked if Mike Evans has a 200-yard game and 3 touchdowns and you're like, well, Mike Evans, there he is.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, when I reflect on the worst calls I make, it's when I'm positing that a trend is going to reverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the trend here is that Mike Evans, you're not missing out on anything on the bench. I actually have him at 31. I have guys like Adam Thielen and Jerry Jeudy, assuming Russell Wilson's going to play.
See, this is where you're going to talk me into the changes because,
well, hey, what this stands for also, for those of you that have the much more simpler task of just your teams and your players, when we were putting together rankings, projections, I always say, Jeff, that if you're doing it honestly, you can do your rankings, and then if you sit down and do them again, they're going to be different. And then do them again, and they're going to be different. And do them again, and they're going to be different. And even when people ask start-sit questions, I often want details. Again, like we've talked about recently, I'll try to give some language to show my level of certitude, trust your gut, or this is the way I'm leaning, versus just giving the answer straight, or even saying, that's a slam dunk.
Well, and it really speaks to, tiers are really kind of the way to look at it. And you're really dealing with ranges of realistic outcomes. And so that's, and that high level outcome that I mentioned with Mike Evans is probably unrealistic at this point. And you kind of have to recognize that. And we've seen him be that boom bust type wide receiver with Tom Brady naturally. And there was, over the course of the season, there had been enough of those booms that at the end of the year, you look back at the numbers and you say, oh, well, he got to where you would expect. He got another 1,000-yard season because it's Mike Evans and that's what he does. But the booms just aren't there this year.
No, that's just the whole Bucks passing game. They're not there for
Yeah.
anybody. Even Chris Godwin in the 0.5 PPR rankings are outside of it. There's some players outside of my top 36. I say top 36. What's significant about that is if you're starting 3 wide receivers, I
Yeah.
mean, you often will start 4. But I'm just curious. Tell me if you think I'm being too harsh leaving these guys out of the top 36. Okay. Uh, Marquise Hollywood Brown is more a B movie this week.
I've got him at 34, so I mean I'm right there, and I could easily move him out. And that Colt McCoy stepping into that offense, we're not seeing that high level, and it's what's the expectation on the Arizona offense right now? And it really just kind of feels like Arizona's not right now, outside of what the workload that James Conner's getting, and potentially for the workload that DeAndre Hopkins could get. That's not an offense that I really want to go down with the ship.
Yeah. And another player, just as another player that every week I pause and think, am I really putting this player where they deserve to be ranked based on this year, as opposed to their name brand value, as opposed to their investment? The player that I'm probably not recommending folks are going to be putting in the lineup this week. And I fear that the neurotic Steelers fan of me says, yeah, but it's a talented receiver against the Steelers. So DJ Moore, why am I telling people to bench him? Well, because that's been the right call more often than not. I've got DJ Moore at wide receiver 39 this week. Am I being too harsh?
No, not at all. No, I've got him at 43. So, I mean,
Yeah.
We know what this Carolina offense wants to be, and they want to run the ball. So much of talk about how Atlanta was running their offense and the frustrations with Kyle Pitts, and Carolina is even more extreme than what Atlanta over the last couple of months, and it's working for them. And so it's just one of these that you're hoping for a long touchdown. And with Sam Darnold taking over, I had a little bit of optimism that maybe DJ Moore, maybe Darnold will just hammer him with targets, and he'll be the one piece that you can count on in the Carolina offense. And then last week he gave you a 0.
Right. And it's because they're going to run the ball 40 times, and the Steelers aren't going to get them out of that mindset. I mean, he may still hit on a big one. Let's talk about if folks do have to dig deeper because of injuries or what have you, just dabbling in some uncertain situations. Okay. If someone had to pick one New England wide receiver, it is the Raiders. It is a game in ideal conditions indoors. If you could pick one off of the waiver wire, because any New England, chances are the New England receivers that are going to play this week are probably on your waiver wire.
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah, so if we're knocking out Jacoby Myers and knocking out Devontae Parker after the concussion, Nelson Aguilar, and being in that revenge game script, and I write about it every week. I love to dive into the revenge games, and I put that in my article. Facing the Raiders, and he's a player that he can make your week just off one play. He's got that capability, but it's kind of seemed like he's the guy that has a little bit more rapport with Mac Jones versus Tyquan Thornton. They're kind of still getting him up to speed, and we saw one glimpse against Cleveland where he scored twice, and he does have that boom potential there, but there's no floor on him. There's no ceiling. The floor is the basement with him. And Kendrick Bourne is kind of that solid piece, but I just don't think that he doesn't give you that big play ability like Nelson Aguilar does, and I don't think the volume is really there on Kendrick Bourne to get you there either.
Yeah, I think it is Aguilar. And I want to again mention that Aguilar basically stopped the play whenever he knew that Devontae Parker was concussed and they wouldn't. So kudos to him. And I think that Aguilar may come through for us. And maybe it's Hunter Henry. But the player I keep wanting to recommend, folks, I have this horrible feeling. But then I did this like with James Cook last week, right? But I have this horrible feeling that if I don't choose Pierre Strong, when people ask me, and we're talking about those flex type questions or emergency running back to, I'm assuming Damian Harris is going to play. I'm assuming Ramondre Stevenson is not. I am feeling good about Strong. I'm thinking they just didn't realize what they had in him, but they got to see it against Arizona, or have the way these rookie running backs have been jerked in and out of the lineup make it too risky to think about playing him.
Well, we saw it last week with it looked like Kevin Harris was going to be the guy that to step in and take over for Ramondre Stevenson for as much as that game that I listened to you earlier and you mentioned that you had to turn the game out. I had to do the same thing. Like
Yeah, that was
that was
terrible.
brutal Monday night, but Kevin Harris got that first opportunity, then he fumbled and then he was done. And so that's where it comes in, where the risk on Pierre Strong, that first mistake, and it doesn't even need to be a fumble with Bill Belichick. It could be a failed blitz pickup and he could just say, nope, not doing it anymore. We're just going to ride Damian Harris and we'll get through that way. And so but the big play potential is there. Strong is a guy that can score from 30, 40 yards out, make your week off just one play. And I don't blame you for having that thought. And especially because we've seen Ramondre Stevenson be such a key piece of this passing attack. And if they don't have Parker, if they don't have Myers, that's going to have to go somewhere. Mac Jones is actually volume wise has been pretty productive over the last month or so. And so he's been getting that volume, and Ramondre Stevenson essentially serving as the wide receiver one in a lot of these, if you were to look just at the raw numbers, the way that the passing attack is going. And so that's somebody's going to step in there. We know how Bill Belichick and traditionally this offense has wanted to manage and juggle that backfield. And Kevin Harris is not going to be the passing back. And Damian Harris, we have never really seen that willingness to make him. So by default, it puts Strong in that position.
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, there's the risk, but I'm enamored with fresh legs at the running back position at this time of year. And that's why I'm inclined to say maybe Chuba Hubbard's a better play than Dante Foreman right now, as he was last week. And otherwise, looking at some of these running backs who don't have a lot of mileage. But sticking back to wide receivers, I guess I'll call this the old banana in the tailpipe, right? The banana in the tailpipe is you haven't used this player all year, and there's a crack in the door. You like him. You want Elijah Moore to help you win a championship. You want him to help you advance. You like Mike White. We didn't mention Mike White among the quarterbacks. You want to believe in this Jets offense, but are we just wishing? Is this magic beans, or is Elijah Moore, because he's that good, he should get an opportunity, assuming Corey Davis is out, deserves a spot in your lineup?
So I think that when you look at the Jets, that's another sliding doors team where the Jets were feeling very good about the midway point of the season, but then they're 2-4 in their last 6 games. And they're starting to reach that point where it's one thing if you're trying to instill culture and you're trying to improve a point to a guy and your team's winning, and that allows you, I think, some leeway with frustrating players. When your team's losing and you're looking for solutions on production, that's going to force you in another direction. And I think that he's the most, outside of Garrett Wilson, he's the most naturally explosive player in that offense. And I think that I feel a whole lot better about that play as long as Corey Davis is ruled out. If Corey Davis is not ruled out, I get pretty nervous there because we've seen him be the second receiving option there. But if he's out, all full steam ahead, I think, on Elijah Moore, just because I think they're desperately looking for answers. This is a team that they have to feel that the season getting away from them a little bit. They're outside of the playoff picture right now, and that's really the first time in a couple months that they've been outside the playoff picture. And I think that players and teams and coaches, when you're trying to really turn the organization around, you wake up on that Monday and you're seeing yourself standing outside the playoff. You're looking at things a little bit different. And so that's kind of where I think the Jets lie, and that pushes them to try some of those things. And we've seen production out of him over the last couple of weeks. So we've seen ramping production. And that's where the other thing that you want to see, where he's getting more and more involved, working his way in. And, if you look at raw numbers, 2 weeks ago, he had like the 7-yard game, but he still had, I think, 7 targets that game. I think, was it maybe like 9 or 10 targets this past week? I'm just going off the top of my head here. So we're seeing that volume go in there, and you love that Detroit passing attack. And we know what can happen in Detroit games. And I think we both kind of have the hesitancy that this is going to be a physical grind them out game because both teams like to play that way. At the same time, we've seen the Lions get in a track meet again and again and again. And so this is the one game, I think, that as you look through, there are reasons to be concerned about so many games this weekend. This is one of those games that the upside is there for both of these offenses to just go crazy.
Yeah, it could be 13-10. It could be 33-30. Yes. It's 21-6, by the way, up in Seattle. If you've been scrounging for production at tight end and just gutting it out with George Kittle, the gods have answered your prayers. You had another long touchdown Now for San Francisco, if you played Brock Purdy as a streamer, it's going to be modestly successful, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, but that might be really it for the passing game. And we might see more Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason. I think you're going to see Jordan Mason's time in this game coming. Geno Smith's still throwing, still out there. At the very least in PPR leagues, it looks like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf aren't going to be total duds. Kenneth Walker, well, there's still time. There's still time, Kenneth Walker. Although I had Kenneth Walker in one of my playoff games. I mean, I didn't feel he's been so good and he's had some big plays. I didn't feel comfortable putting him on the bench. I guess speaking of tight end, tight end's like the most boring position to talk about. Basically, there's certain guys like if you have them, you're starting them. And then I guess my question, because I'm just looking at everything through Saints colored glasses, am I crazy that my number 10 tight end this week is Taysom Hill?
No, I'm saying I have the exact same thing.
Again,
yes, I do. I really do.
This is a special edition of this is like our you two meet. Oh, yes. Does that make us best friends? Yeah.
No, I'm there, and we've seen the Atlanta matchup. You know that ceiling's there, and so if this is. It's just one of those, and I think the the big brain play on Taysom Hill, like in the first beginning part of the season, people were aggressively ranking him as a top 5 tight end, thinking like, well, that range of outcome where if you get the game that he breaks off the 40-yard rush and then throws the touchdown pass and does all these things, that he's just got a different ceiling than most of the tight ends that you're looking at, and so that's where if you don't have somebody that really ranked above him. Below him, you're really just kind of begging for 4 catches and a touchdown. There was I had a tweet this week where if you look at PPR scoring, Noah Gray from the Chiefs had 3 catches for 45 yards last week, and he was tight end 13 last week. He was right outside of top 12 on 3 catches for 45 yards, no touchdowns, anything like that. And so Taysom Hill just has that range of outcomes, that ceiling. And as you're in a playoff matchup, if you're looking for that wild card differentiator, that's where he gets really interesting.
Yeah, he owns Atlanta. He had 4 for 81 and a touchdown rushing in week 1. Last year, he started against them twice. He had 49 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in one of the games. He had 83 rushing yards the other game. So I'll take my chances with Taysom Hill. And someone mentioned Jeff Driscoll. I think Yahoo Leagues. I'm not sure if there are other software where you can play him as a yes, him too. He threw a touchdown last week. He had 30-some yards running. He would have easily a little better blocking and decision-making, maybe had the game-winning touchdown to have a tremendous success. So yes, absolutely. Once you get past and that tight end 9 spot, tight end 10 spot, it's because Kelsey, Andrews, Njoku, Kittle, Hawkins, and I'm reading down my rankings, Schultz, Goddard, if he plays, Ingram coming off of his career game, and Gerald Everett, because who gave up Ingram's career game, Tennessee, that's who Gerald Everett's playing. And then there's just this clear dividing line. And after that, you're just rolling the dice. Yep. So why not somebody who can get some touches? Cole Kmet's an interesting one simply because he's that clear number 1 target with the wide receivers decimated, and Philadelphia's outside corners are so good that they kind of funnel you to target the tight end. So Cole Kmet's one that I guess you could make a case for him over the Taysom Hill, Jeff Driscoll's of the world. I've got to ask this too. This is one. It's a Detroit Tigers. Tigers. Yes. So are you a Tigers fan? Let's do a little on the couch off the rails here. Are you a Tigers fan?
I am a Tigers fan. So I grew up in Northwest Ohio. I grew up in the Ohio
Toledo
strip, to the Toledo strip. So out west in the country. So the Toledo Mudhens were the Tigers farm team. The Tigers were my pro team. So I'm an Ohio State fan, but I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, and my fandom. So I had one grandfather that was a big college fan, big Ohio State fan, watched the Buckeyes every week, watched the basketball, football. And then my other grandpa was a huge Tigers fan, and every time I went over to his house, he had the Tigers on the radio, and it was just one of those that I picked up my fandoms from either directions, and that was my first ever professional sporting event. I saw Cal Ripken in a street game.
Wow.
Yeah, in Tiger Stadium, and Tony Clark hit a home run outside of the stadium.
You got to go to old school Tiger Stadium that is no longer standing. That's awesome. That's awesome. I went by last time we were up in Detroit. I went by. I think there's like an old, like a police softball field or something over there now. Yeah. There's that bar, the Babe Ruth tribute bar that's over there. Detroit's fantastic. And isn't it wild that Scherzer and Verlander are going to pitch together again? If they bring a World Series home to the Mets, but they couldn't do it, well, I can't say it wasn't on them. It wasn't on them that the Tigers didn't win the World Series while they were there, but that was pretty wild.
But It's been a long time. Now I feel like it's been a lifetime ago since the Tiger teams were assembled and really kind of threatening. And it's been baseball's a hard sport that, you know, if your team's not good, it's hard to be invested in it. It's easy to check out, I think.
Yeah.
And so the Tigers have been not good for a while now, and certainly still support them. But you know, and now with the fantasy football content creation world and the Debbie Dynasty world that never stops, it's putting that to the back burner. But that was really kind of one of my first loves. So that's introduction into fantasy sports, playing fantasy baseball, going to baseball games. And I got to go to I've been to Tigers playoff, the first ever playoff game in Comerica Park. Kenny Rogers pitched against the Yankees, and I got to go to that game. I got to go to the World Series between the Cubs and the Indians in 2016.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that was a memorable. I feel like that.
Wrigley, so
I shouldn't get into details. I was going to say I feel like that World Series broke reality, but we'll leave that there. I've gone to a handful of games at Comerica Park. Tremendous. I went to one of the games when Miguel Cabrera was sitting at 29.99.
Yeah,
this year, and in the eighth inning with the Tigers up 2-1, Aaron Boone intentionally walked him, which my wife said she thought people were going to like take the field. The Detroiters were going to like pull him limb from limb after that. But then Austin Meadows got a bloop single, and the Yankees lost the game because of it. So that was almost better, you know, chanting Yankees suck with all those wonderful people in Detroit. And hey, I'm a Pirates fan. So my original foray into the idea as a kid of I want to be a sports talker, sports thinker, was I just wanted to be the play-by-play guy for the Pirates. That's what I wanted to do. And they'll be good again. O'Neal Cruz is one of the most exciting players in baseball. Okay, enough baseball. It's December. What are we doing to talk about baseball?
I know.
It's weak because of the finger. Someone in the chat room, because they thought it was a Syracuse finger. That's my alma mater. I was going to be excited about that, but I'm excited to talk about anything with Jeff Bell for you fine people. It's week 15. Chris Allen and I will be back Sunday morning for Start Sit, but know that you will have to set your lineup for those games on Saturday. And then next week, no Thursday night show because of the holiday, but we'll be back on the 29th for our last Thursday night show of the season. And then, as Cecil said, Matt and Gene and Cecil and I will get together for some kind of epic 2-hour final send-off of the good old Thursday night crew. But we like the new Thursday night crew, especially all of you out there. Fantastic people, and we just love serving you. It's the best because you're so classy.